Hi, welcome back to Wednesday's video. So, once again, I was reading If We Were Giants, and we read the first two chapters, and now we are going to do chapters 3 and 4 today. All right, so chapter 3. The next morning, Kira woke up to bird song in her ears and sunlight warm on her face. The cart was gently rocking as Taro pulled it along the path. He strode upright, the cane no longer in his hands, and his gait was sure and strong. She lifted her head out of the tangle of blankets and saw that they were nearly home. "Ah, did you walk all night?" "Aye," Taro said, without turning around. Kira stretched and yawned, then climbed out of the blankets, hopped on the ground, and fell into step beside him, working out the kinks of her sleepy legs. The eye patch and the tooth black and the dirt were all gone. The volcano man was just her father again. "Do you want me to take a turn pulling the cart?" "No, that's okay, little one." Taro finally looked over at her and offered a shadow of a smile. "It's a lot easier now that you're out of it. Did you get some good sleep?" Kira nodded. They walked along in silence for a while, the sun rising higher in the sky and growing warmer on her patches of bare skin. She wasn't sure how to ask him what she wanted to. As she drifted off to sleep, all she could think about was the look on his face as he grabbed her and hustled her out of the village while that man told his strange tale. Finally, she broached the subject. "Paha?" "Yes, my dear." "That strange story last night. You don't think... I mean, there's no chance of any of that being true, right?" "It doesn't matter." The smile faded onto Taro's eyes. "A story is true if people believe it. You know that." "Got it." That was a relief. "So he's just doing what we do then, right?" Taro gave her a look. "How do you mean?" "He's just making up scary stories so people stay away from that village. Not blue." Taro set his jaw and shifted his eyes back to the road ahead. "Perhaps. Because he talked about the settlement by the cliffs, with the waterfall behind it. That's where we went on my first trip outside, remember? It was so pretty, and there were no weird taker people there. That was a year ago, Kira." "Wait, so you think maybe what he was talking about was really true? Not just the story true?" It was a long time before Taro answered. "I don't know, Kira. Much can happen in a year." "But what if he..." "We'll talk no more about that just now," Taro sighed. He turned to look at her again, placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "I'm sorry if that came out as a sharp tone. I just need some time to think, okay? We will discuss it before we go outside the next time." Kira placed her hand on top of his. It was warm and reassuring, just like always. "Okay, Paha." It was easy to put it out of her mind just then, because she recognized the slow curve their path was taking as it followed the river, and she knew just that on the other side it was Zidu. That warm and reassuring feeling, too, because as much as she enjoyed being outside, she had to admit that she also liked coming home. Sure, she had seen many interesting things and people, but she loved her own friends and family, yes, even Tico. As they rounded that bend in the path, the volcano rose dramatically from the ground in front of them. Clouds of smoke drifted out of the crater way up at the top, making it look like the volcano was on the verge of erupting and spewing molten lava all over the surrounding fields at any moment. "I wonder who's on smoke duty this morning," she said. "Probably the Kala twins." Kira had to grin at that. The Zidu elders had chosen well when giving that job to the twins. Keeping the fire stoked just inside the rim of the volcano all through the day and night was a long and potentially boring task. But the twins were inseparable, and they kept each other company the whole time with no complaints. And if one of them snook a nap on the job, well, the other one was there to take care of things. She was glad she She hadn't been chosen to be a helper for smoke duty. It would have been so dull to sit in the exact spot all of the time. But as she looked at the crater hundreds of feet above their heads, she had to admit that at least the view was spectacular. Kira breathed in deeply and smiled. It was good to be back, and she couldn't wait to tell Tico about the strange story she heard in Lukui. Kira and her father marched along their big, beautiful volcano home. Chapter 4. As she trudged up the steep slope with her father, Kira scanned the hillside thickets of brush and jumbles of rock formations. Even though she had approached from the outside multiple times now, her trained eye simply could not find the hidden entrance. Was it there, by the sagebrush and the... No, that was just a trick of shadow and light. Kira held a hand above her heads to block out the sun and squinted as she made her way up the volcano wall. Could it be over there, behind that gnarled scrub pine? Maybe then, why wasn't... Gotcha. Kira let out a squeal as she grabbed around the waist. She had spun around to see her friend Tattoo, who had slipped out of a crack in the hillside surrounded by a clump of thorny bushes. The girl threw back her head and laughed, her unruly nest of hair flopping all over. The look on your face gets better every time. Kira placed a hand over her racing heart and blew out a steam of air. If you keep doing that, I might just stop coming home altogether. Girls, hush now. Kuzo, one of the official watchers at this post, peeked his head out from the narrow opening in the rock wall and shook a finger at Tattoo. A good helper should know better. Come inside. He beckoned them forward and nodded at Kira's father. Welcome back, Taro. You must be glad to be safely home after your travels. Taro made a fist and touched it to his forehead. Zidu provides, he said in greeting. As Kira slipped through the crack and made her very way through the twisting tunnel carved into the rock, she once again marveled at how so many Ziduans, even the grown-ups, seemed intimidated by the prospect of going outside. It gave her a little thrill of self-satisfaction to know that she had seen things that few of them ever would. But as she emerged from the tunnel onto a ledge inside the volcano crater, she had to admit it was good to be back home. One of the benefits of traveling outside was being able to see Zidu through fresh eyes whenever she returned, and feelings of awe and pride reawakened each time. The morning sunlight filtered through the opening far above, softly illuminating the intricate levels of terraces that made up their concealed community. Dozens of great overlapping ridges carved into the rock rose over her head and fell away beneath her, like a giant spiral staircase. Some had groupings of huts for the various clans and little villages. Others supported land for crops or livestock or places of gathering. And far below, at the very bottom of the volcano's interior, was the pool of fresh spring water that served as the lifeblood of the community. But Kira didn't have time to dwell on the amazing architectural accomplishments of countless generations of Ziduan people, because Tico spotted her right away. He must have been scoping out the hidden entrance since sunup, waiting all morning for their return. Kira, he raced over and tugged at her cloak. How is the outside this time? He asked eagerly. Oh, you know, she shrugged as casually as possible. It was pretty good, I guess. Kira faked a big yawn. Stop teasing. Tico put his hands on his hips. Was it amazing? Tell me. Kira broke into a grin. You got me. It was completely amazing. She gave him a sly, sidelong glance. I caught a squirrel this time. Wow, let me see it. Tico dove for the pouch tied to her belt, grabbing it with both hands. Kira pushed his arms away. I don't have it anymore. I felt bad for taking it from its home, so I let it go. Tico crossed his arms and huffed. You didn't catch any squirrel. Kira's grin got wider. So that means you believe they do exist? No. If I get another one, do you want me to bring it back? Yes. They both laughed. Tico looked over at where their father was still talking to Kuzo at the entrance and lowered his voice to a whisper. Did you talk to him about me going with you next time? Kira tousled her hair affectionately. One of the things she admired about her brother is that he didn't share the usual Zindun fear of everything beyond the crater walls. Tico was dying to get outside someday. Oh, Tico, you know he won't even think about it until you get to helper age. His shoulders slumped. That's not fair. Kira looked at Taro, still tied up in conversation. But I did bring something that might cheer you up. Really? What is it? Tico was back at her, jumping up like a puppy. Show me. She laughed and untied her pouch. First, I got you a little treat. She pulled out a sack of honey nuts, which he accepted eagerly. Hide those for Maha, or she'll only let you have 2 or 3 at a time. Oh, I will. Thanks, Kira. And I brought you something else. She glanced around conspiratorially. If you can keep a really big secret. Tico's eyes went wide. No way, he breathed. You found more? Kira nodded. She reached back into the pouch and slowly removed her fist. With a dramatic flourish, learned the watchings of her storyteller father. She unfurled her fingers to reveal the 3 rough arrowheads she found while walking next to a creek. Kira dropped the gifts into Tico's open palm, and he went silent as he studied them. War and weapons were foreign concepts in Xidu. The only knowledge of battle their people had was from the stories Taro told around the cook fires when he visited the various clans in the community. Kira knew these stories were meant to be cautionary tales, examples of what could happen to their society if they stopped cooperating. But the taboo nature of the subject had the opposite effect on Tico and his friends. They were fascinated with all of the epic battles that no doubt must be raging somewhere outside. And they secretly played Zidun Warrior when no grown-ups were looking. He lifted the biggest arrowhead and turned it this way and that. These are incredible. Thank you so much, Kira. She gave him a stern look. Now you better hide those even better than you do the treats, understand? Or we'll both be in trouble. Nico nodded reverently. Then his face lit up. I have the perfect place, my secret spot. Come with me, I'll show you. Kira called to her father. I'll look after Tico. We'll be home just in time for lunch. Taro waved at her as she hustled to join her brother. She smirked at the idea of a secret spot. Pretty much every nook and cranny of the volcano's interior had been mapped out years ago. Nothing was truly hidden in Xidu. There possibly wasn't enough room for secrets. They neared the end of the ledge, where they had entered the volcano's interior, but Tico ran past the stone staircase carved into the crater wall. There were other ways than the stairs to get from one broad terrace to another. You could rappel down on climbers' ropes or take the crank-powered wooden elevator, but Tico preferred to. Woohoo! He yelled as he leapt straight off the edge and plunged into a cushion of moss and leaves waiting below. Kira rolled her eyes, yet she had to admit she made the same jump that was fun, to feel her stomach flip-flop as her body rushed through the open air. She popped up from the small pile and had to jog to keep pace with Tico as they circled the volcano's towering walls, heading to his hideaway. Kira waved to people as they rushed past. There was Mina, one of her old teachers, playing with a group of small children in front of her hut. There was Samos, who delivered fresh milk each morning from the goat pens. and a group of builders and their helpers patching up a suspension bridge that spanned out 2 prominent terraces. It was comforting to watch the Zeduans take care of their home and for one another. As Kira got older, she took in more details about how the community functioned. Everything was in balance. Her people lived in harmony with each other and the resources that the volcano provided. Tico had clambered up a series of staircases until he was more than 3/4 of the way to the rim of the crater. Kira, not well rested from her all-night journey in the cart, found herself wheezing as she tried to keep pace. She looked up to see her brother beckoning to her. He had stopped at the base of one of the courier zipline stations. By the time she made it up to that terrace, Tico had flopped on the ground, panting, and was watching the couriers. The station, one of 6 evenly spaced around the interior of Zedu, was a wooden platform on 8-foot supports. Zipline cables radiated out like spokes of a wheel, connected to various terraces clear across the other side of the volcano. A Zeduan citizen who had needed something to a different clan brought it to the station and dropped it off. Then a courier put it in a pouch, secured themselves to a harness attached to a zip line, and stepped off the platform that extended right out over the lip of the terrace, hundreds of feet above the ground below. The result was an exhilarating ride through the air to the delivery spot. Tico watched, rapt, and as another carrier stepped off into nothingness, and in mere seconds was no bigger than the eye of a dot, zooming halfway across the vast volcano. Kira sat down and nudged Tico. That would be the perfect job for someone I know. It would be fun, Tico admitted. But you know I want to be a builder. They sat there for a moment, catching their breath. Well, Kira finally said as she looked around, aren't you going to take me to your hiding place? Tico put a finger on his lips. He was watching the activity on the platform closely. We have to wait until they're all busy. A few moments later, a man climbed the steps and approached a helper, while another helper assisted a courier with her harness straps. There was no other couriers or helpers to take notice of the 2 kids down below. Tico jumped up, grabbed Kira's hand, and pulled her underneath the wooden stairs. They raced along below the courier platform, made it to the rock wall where the structure was secured, and then Tico wedged himself into a crack in the wall and disappeared. Kira was impressed. Tico had actually managed to find a hidden nook, and all of the positioning of the courier station would keep prying eyes away from it. Clever. When she followed him into a sort of a cave that formed into a little room, she was even more impressed. Using material that was clearly left over from various construction projects, he and his friends had built tables and chairs, a couple of hammocks, and even a target board for a game of rolly darts. Wow, Tico, this is nice. The builders would be crazy not to take you when you're old enough. Thanks, Tico beamed at the praise. It took us forever to sneak in all of the supplies. He stood on tiptoe to retrieve a wooden box from a little shelf of rock and stashed his arrowheads inside. It's been easier lately, because all of the grown-ups are getting ready for the Harvest Festival. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Kira had been away a little longer than she realized. I will never forget about that. It's my favorite time of year. You like it more than your birthday? Way more. The grown-ups are always so busy during the day, and then they go to bed early and sleep hard all night. Us kids can do whatever we want. Kira smiled and shook her head. She should have known. Tico tugged on her cloak again. Now tell me about your adventures this time. Don't leave anything out. And no teasing. Kira laughed. I promised. They cuddled up in one of the hammocks, and she told him everything she could remember. When she listed the animals Paha had pointed out to her as they hiked along, Tico peppered her with questions about the beast they had to hide from, especially the crocodiles. She told him about a place on the river bank where the water was so wide you could hardly see the other side. She described what it was like to almost lose yourself in a real forest. She reported on what the kids were wearing in distant villages, along with what games they were playing. When she finally tired of answering all of Tico's eager questions, she yawned and stretched. We should be getting back. I know Maha will want to know where we are. Tico grumbled a little bit before reluctantly agreeing. Then they snuck out from under the courier platform and made their way home. The huts were arranged in a semicircle, which formed a courtyard where the children could be watched by all of the parents of their clan. Kira became a bit nostalgic for the times before she was a helper, and there were countless hours to play here with all of her friends. The courtyard was empty by midday, however, with everyone either off at school or doing their jobs around the community. Maybe she could sneak in a nap before. Kira! Her mother burst from the hut and came straight for her. You're here! You're safe! Johanna grabbed Kira in a fierce hug, pulled back and held her by the shoulders to study her face, then hugged her tightly again. You are safe. Wow, Kira knew Maha was perpetually nervous when her daughter was on the outside, but this welcome seemed different somehow, a little more frantic than usual. Kira looked over Johanna's shoulder at Tico, let her tongue hang out from the side of her mouth, and made a face like she was being suffocated to death. Yes, Maha, she croaked. Tico giggled. Taro stepped out of the hut, and Kira glanced over at him. She furrowed her brow. Paha was usually very relaxed after returning home, but now his eyes looked clouded with concern. Was there something going on? Johanna finally stopped hugging Kira so tightly, but she still held on to her daughter's shoulders as she stepped back to study her. Oh my, you look thin, my dear. When was the last time you ate? Are you warm enough at night? She glanced at her spouse. Taro, why is she covered in grime? Don't you ever make sure she washes when you go wandering about? I know for good and certain that there are plenty of lakes and streams on the outside. Has no other village managed to invent soap? All is well, Maha, Kira said. Johanna studied her, eyebrows scrunched up. Sometimes I worry that you're becoming just as good as your father at telling stories. But that's the plan, Maha. Johanna finally broke into a smile and hugged her again. I suppose it is. Come in. There's some stew left over. I'll warm it up for you. Kira and Tico walked into the hut. Taro put a comforting arm around Johanna as they followed. Her mother was whispering, but Kira could still make out the words. You promised that no one saw the two of you. No one who shouldn't have? Taro whispered in return, his tone pleasant. No, my love. It was a good trip. Very successful. He nodded in Kira's direction. You should be proud of your daughter. She is learning quickly. Someday she will be a fine storyteller. Kira's heart glowed with the recognition from her father, but it was short-lived as she could not help to think that something was not quite right between her parents. Lunch was served, and the family talked and laughed and reveled in being united once again. But Kira kept an eye on her parents. The little secret glances they gave each other, the sleep circles under Paha's eyes, the worried lines around Maha's eyes, and the way her mouth, usually so smiley, kept turning down at the corners. Kira sighed. Grown-ups. They always thought they were being so secretive, but they never were. When would they realize that kids weren't stupid? Kira decided to find out exactly what was going on. Alrighty. So there was chapters 3 and 4. and I will be back on Friday to read a few more chapters. Everything's well, and I hope this sees you in good spirits also. Bye.